Hi, my name is Nathan Shaw. In 2020, I published a book called A Defining Moment in History. It includes prophetic words for the United States over a 6-year period from 2014 through to 2020. The message of the book seems even more relevant now than when it was first published. God is calling forth many freedom fighters in our generation. Maybe you are one of them. Let me briefly mention 6 prophecies, 4 from the book and a couple given more recently. Number 1, in 2014, God gave me a word that I have called the foundation of freedom. Let me read just a small portion of this prophecy. Speaking of the United States of America. Throughout its short history, a cry for freedom has always come before God's throne from her shores. God will respond to the cry of these faithful intercessors. They have stood in the gap in pulpits, in wars, in governments, in schools, in homes, in Hollywood, on the streets, from public platforms, and in hiddenness. Their prayers, their actions, their labors of love, and their sacrifices have not gone unnoticed. Out of the shakings will come a renewed spirit and a fierce resolve. Freedom fighters will take a stand for a freedom that does not compromise responsibility. A new breed of spiritual and political leader will arise. These brave voices will seem small and insignificant to many, but God's favor will be on them. Ultimately, their voices will prevail. Rather than rail at the sins of the nation, they will tell her who she is. Rather than despair at the nation's loss of direction, they will prophesy her ultimate destiny. Pray for these freedom fighters. Through them, the nation will come to value the responsibility of freedom and walk in her God-ordained destiny. In the midst of the shakings, do not despair. The best is yet to come. And then in 2017, the second prophecy I'd like to share was given to me. It's about Samson, and it was to do with President Trump. But first of all, just let me set the scene. In Judges chapter 15, it talks about how the Philistines were upset because Samson had given them a lot of trouble. And at that time, Samson was living in the territory of Judah. And so the Philistines came to the men of Judah and they said, "We want you to hand Samson over to us." And so the men of Judah went to Samson in his stronghold and they said, "We're going to hand you over to the Philistines." Samson agreed. The condition was as long as they didn't kill him. And so the men of Judah tied his arms with 2 new ropes and handed him over to the Philistines. And as soon as he was handed over, the Spirit of God came on him and he broke free from the ropes and he saw a jawbone of a donkey close by. He picked up the jawbone and he slayed 1,000 Philistines with the jawbone of a donkey. After doing that, he was exhausted, and so once again he was vulnerable to the enemy because he was so exhausted. So he cried out to God, and God caused a spring of water to come up from the ground. Samson then went on to lead Israel for the next 20 years because it became so clear to Israel that God's mandate was on him. It's interesting that in Judges 15, Samson came close to death twice. This is what I wrote in this prophecy in 2017. I believe that President Trump will find himself in a position like Samson in Judges 15, where his hands are tied and it looks like imminent defeat. God's Spirit will empower and inspire him to use a strategy that is both unexpected and unusual. It will totally turn the situation around and cause people to acknowledge God's mandate on him. You know, in the last couple of months, President Trump has come close to death twice. However, I believe this prophecy still has a future fulfillment. So consider the sequence of events. Number 1, an appearance of imminent defeat. Number 2, a Spirit-inspired strategy that is unexpected and unusual. Killing people with the jawbone of a donkey is definitely unexpected and unusual. Number 3, a dramatic turnaround. When the Spirit of God came on Samson, everything shifted and turned around. And number 4, an acknowledgement of God's mandate on Samson. I believe God is right now raising up key players that will lead the United States over the next 20 years. Like Samson, it's time to cry out to God. The soul of a nation and the destiny of many nations is at stake. The cry of God's people will help break demonic assignments and release the authority of divine mandate. The third prophecy was given to me in 2019. It was a prayer alert for President Trump. God gave me this prayer alert as I was reading Psalm 55. I got down to verse 9 where it says this, "For I see violence and strife in the city. Day and night they prowl about on its walls. Malice and abuse are within it. Destructive forces are at work in the city. Threats and lies never leave its streets." David was speaking that about Jerusalem, but those words so easily applied to Washington, D.C. And of course, this was written before there was anything like an assassination attempt on President Trump's life. There are two powerful declarations from Psalm 55 that we can speak into the situation. Number one is from verse 9, "Lord, confuse the wicked and confound their words." And number two is from verse 18, "Lord, even though many oppose President Trump, rescue him unharmed from the battle waged against him." I wonder how many people started praying and declaring those two things when I first wrote about them back in 2019. The fourth prophecy was given to me in 2020. God spoke to me when Donald Trump's daughter, Tiffany Trump, was making her speech at the Republican National Convention, and she said this one line, "Miracles are a gift from God." And that moment, God spoke to me so powerfully. In the Bible, God brought about national deliverance through miracles. A good example of this will be Gideon. God used Gideon to defeat the army of the Midianites with only 300 men. Another example is Samson, who was used to deliver and lead the nation of Israel because God's Spirit came on him and enabled him to do great exploits. Trump turning his head during the assassination attempt on the 13th of July 2024 was undoubtedly a miracle. And this is just one of many miracles that we are going to see in the days ahead. Freedom fighters can expect to see many, many miracles, not only starting now, but also in the days that are ahead of us. Because the truth is this, miracles are a gift from God, and He is a generous giver. The fifth prophecy I want to talk about was given to me in 2023. God began to speak to me about mantles and seats and how mantles and seats are very different. A mantle is something you wear. It's like a spiritual endowment, a spiritual equipping, a spiritual empowerment to do a specific job. Whereas seats are positions of authority over a specific jurisdiction. When you are in a seat of government, you have authority over a specific territory. And this is what God showed me, that Satan works over time to keep the right mantles out of the right seats. You see, President Trump knows he has a mantle from God, and he has a profound respect for the seat of government called the President of the United States. But you need to understand that there's a difference between the person, the mantle, and the seat. These are three different things. Donald Trump is a person just like you and I, and God loves him just like He loves every single person. But the person is not what's causing the contention. It's the mantle that he has been given by God. Donald Trump has a mantle, a spiritual endowment from God that's specifically been given to him to accomplish a very specific task. And then the seat of government is, of course, a territory, a jurisdiction that we are given authority over. And of course, the particular seat in contention is the seat of the President of the United States of America. And so the contention is to keep Donald Trump, not the person, but the mantle that he carries. It's to keep the authority of that mantle out of the seat of government. The sixth prophecy I want to talk about was given to me just recently. In fact, only a couple of months ago, God spoke to me about the upcoming 2024 election in the United States, and He gave me 4 words. The words were coalition, conflict, crisis, and change. And I believe these 4 words describe the process that we are going to go through. It's already started. There is already a coalition beginning to form. In fact, He also gave me the word a coalition of the righteous. He gave me the phrase, a coalition of the righteous. There is a coalition of the righteous, and it's already begun to form, and we need to pray for this coalition because it's a strategic coalition. And when he said a coalition of the righteous, I had an understanding that he wasn't talking about righteous in the terms of the Christian doctrine of righteousness. He was talking about righteous in the terms of the right people. This is a coalition of the righteous, a coalition of the right people, custom picked by God. They are the right people for the moment, the right people for the jobs that they're going to be called into. God is raising up a strong, flexible, diverse coalition necessary for the times in which we live. I believe there will be a conflict and crisis surrounding the 2024 election. But although conflict, crisis, and chaos are great disruptors, no matter how intense things get, we are to pray for positive change. Those were the 4 words God gave me: coalition, conflict, crisis, and change. And there's also a double meaning to this coalition of the righteous, because I believe God is raising up a coalition of intercessors from all over the world, and that their prayers are coming up before the throne, and they are having an influence in the 2024 election. On the 13th of July, 2024, President Trump narrowly missed being assassinated when a bullet hit the top of his right ear. Immediately after being shot, President Trump rose up, pumping his fist, declaring, "Fight, fight, fight." In this moment, he displayed rare courage. In many ways, God's people have lost their courage. President Trump is an in-your-face prophetic message challenging God's people and a new generation of freedom fighters to walk in courage despite the intensity of the fight. My book, A Defining Moment in History, contains a lot more information about each of these 6 prophecies. I will leave a link to the book below. All 6 prophecies can be found online at heartofdavidministries.org. Once again, check the links below. Finally, don't underestimate the power of one person. We live in significant times, and you play a role. Whatever you are facing, take courage. It's time for a new breed of freedom fighter to arise.